Here are the questions people are asking from the internet. If Vermont is able to secure a single-payer health care system, yes, Bernie, you're making headlines. Do you think it will eventually spread to the rest of the country? Well, tell them what's going on in Vermont, because...
Okay. In Vermont, our state legislature recently passed a Medicare for All single-payer piece of legislation. The governor is strongly supportive, and we think the Senate, the state Senate, will do the same. So it is likely that the state of Vermont may be the first state in America to pass a cost-effective health care system that guarantees health care to all people. To answer your question, if Vermont does it, and if it works well, as I think it might, my view is that other states will follow it, and eventually we will have a national Medicare for All single-payer program, which is what we should have.
Alan Arkin's voice.
Oh, he does?
You have Alan Arkin's voice.
Yeah, that's right, a little bit. What do you think about that?
I certainly, whatever the state of Vermont wants to do is their business, and they'll go through the legislative process. I certainly hope that doesn't happen nationally. I look at what goes on in Europe. For instance, my sister-in-law lives in London.
What goes on in Europe? People are healthy.
No, but
And they don't.
but they're not.
And if they have to go to a doctor, they just go to a doctor.
Well, and my sister-in-law went to the doctor to give birth, and was told because she was too fit, too well in shape, that she couldn't have an epidural. And I think a lot of Americans worry that we'll get to a point where grin and bear it or here bite on this is going to be our health care policy.
Wait a minute,
and that's very scary.
They live longer than us, they have a lower infant mortality rate than us, and they dress better than us.
When was the last time you were in England?
When was the last time you were in
I don't know about
France,
dressing
Italy,
better than us.
Sweden, Denmark? Come on.
Here's the reality. I mean, anecdotes are not good enough. I mean, the truth of the matter is that in most of the European countries, people have health care as a right. In our country, 50 million people have no health insurance at all, and we end up spending twice as much as any other country. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
But when people need emergency surgery and they can afford it, they come to the United States.
Yeah, if they're rich.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean,
that is
that's the thing
absolutely
about
true.
it.
For people who have the money, you're right. We have the best health care system in the world. But for the middle class and working families, that is not the case. 45,000 Americans will die this year because they don't have access to a doctor.
Right.
That's
I mean,
a fact.
Absolutely. We can talk about, certainly, we can talk about affordability or accessibility, with rural health care as well. But, I worry that if we think health care is expensive now, wait till it's free.
But that's not true. That is not true.
How do we know that it's not true?
Because every other country in the world that has universal health care spends significantly less per capita than we do. That's why.
I mean,
I think, can I jump in on this?
Please do,
I think
please.
there's another part of the healthcare debate that people don't listen to very often, which is the pre-existing conditions issue. When you work around people with disabilities, they have a lot of pre-existing conditions. And I was in Nebraska several months ago when I was talking to a guy who's a former cop. He said, we're all so angry about the health care, Obamacare, it's a disaster. And we were in a Special Olympics environment, 2,000 people with special needs in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I said, I don't know that much about health care. I'm no expert. But what I do know is that the new law makes it impossible to deny health care to people with pre-existing conditions. So for our athletes, the new law is really good news. And the cop took a long pause, the former cop, and he said to me, I never knew that was in the bill. If I'd known that was in the bill, I would have supported it.
And that's a provision Republicans supported.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying a lot of Americans have not unpacked the bill. They don't understand the pieces of health. I mean, as you were saying, everybody wanted health care reform, and now all of a sudden everybody thinks it's a bad idea because we've lost track of what we really were after. We really were after allowing a person, an adult with Down syndrome, to see a doctor and not be denied by a health insurance company or by some kind of health care provider any access to care, any access to dental care. I mean, just on the face of the fact that they have a disability. I mean, those are the kinds of provisions that inspire Americans to be great when they remember you are fighting for something good, something you believe in, something that's just, and all of a sudden everybody rises.
Ask not what you can do for your country.
No, you got it wrong. As usual, you got it wrong.
We all
That's
breathe
not
the
what your
same
country can
air.
do for you.
The bottom line in this debate is that
he was getting there.
every major country on earth guarantees health care as a right. We don't. And we end up spending far more than they do. So I think what most Americans want is universal health care in a cost-effective way, which happens to be Medicare for all.
I don't know if people know what There's a group called RAM, Remote Area Medical. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
60 Minutes did a piece on them. They used to drop into third world countries.
Right.
And they would, it's a group of hundreds of doctors who are volunteering their time. Dentists, people. They would just go to a place, godforsaken shitholes of the world, and people would come from the village, and people who, just couldn't get dentistry. Well, now they work almost exclusively in America. They were here in Los Angeles, a major metropolitan city, and people lined up a full day in advance so they could just get their teeth cleaned or have a breast cancer exam. Now, something has to change in America when a third world organization has to drop in on this country to...
Absolutely. We did the same thing. We have dentists come to our events now. We have dentists come to special. We do about 100,000 health screenings a year at track meets, and the dentists come. They volunteer, and we routinely find 15% of the athletes randomly screened go to the emergency room. Go to the emergency room from the track or from the swimming pool because they have such acute dental or oral cavity disease that they're at risk of either acute pain, which they're suffering from and not identifying, or oral cancer
And when you talk about
disease.
cost,
In the United States, not in Rwanda, where we also do the same thing, not in Afghanistan, where we also do the same thing, but in New Jersey, California.
And the cost, of course,
it's
is so
outrageous.
much greater when you let the problems fester
of course.
as opposed to...
That's exactly right. One of the issues that I work very hard on at healthcare reform is doubling the number of community health centers.
Right.
Study after study shows just what you said. If you keep people from going to the emergency room, if you keep people from getting very sick and ending up in the hospital, you save money.
Oh, Bernie, studies are socialist. All right, thank you, everybody. We got to go. We'll see you next week.